This 1879 portrait seemed to show a reunion, until experts found something unsettling about the enslaved girl. Dr. Amanda Chen studied the oil painting on her computer screen at the Smithsonian's Conservation Lab in Washington, D.C. It was May 2024, and she had spent months analyzing 19th-century American portraits as part of a project documenting post-Civil War art. This painting disturbed her. Dated 1879, it depicted two young women about 18 or 19 years old, seated close together in a garden. One woman was white, wearing an ornate blue silk dress, her blonde hair styled fashionably. The other was black, dressed in a simpler brown gown, her dark hair neatly pulled back. What caught Amanda's attention was their positioning. They sat side by side on a stone bench, shoulders nearly touching, both smiling sincerely. It was unusual. Post-war paintings rarely portrayed black and white subjects with such intimacy and equality. The painting had been donated by the Whitfield family of Charleston, South Carolina. A brass plate read Margaret and Clara, 1879. The donation note explained that the portrait was discovered in their grandmother's attic in 1956. Margaret Whitfield was their ancestor, but the identity of Clara was unknown. The painting had been hidden away for decades. The phrase hidden away stayed with Amanda. She began standard conservation analysis using X-rays to examine the painting's layers. When the X-ray image appeared, her breath stopped. Beneath the surface, invisible to the naked eye, were heavy, unmistakable shapes. Around the black woman's wrists and ankles, iron shackles deliberately painted over. She leaned back, her heart racing. This was not simply a portrait of two young women. Beneath the paint were symbols of bondage and enslavement intentionally concealed. Why would an artist paint shackles only to hide them? What was the true relationship between these women, and why had the portrait been concealed for so long? Amanda contacted Dr. Evelyn Washington, a historian specializing in slavery-era artifacts. "I found something extraordinary," she said. "A painting from 1879 shows two friends, but X-rays reveal shackles hidden beneath the paint. I need to know who these women were." Evelyn paused briefly before responding. "Send me everything. If there is a story here, we will uncover it." Amanda began assembling files, aware she was about to reveal a truth someone had tried to bury. Evelyn arrived 2 days later carrying folders on the Whitfield family. They met in Amanda's lab where the painting hung, appearing calm and peaceful. "Show me what you found," Evelyn said. Amanda displayed the X-ray images. "Look at Clara's wrists and ankles." The artist painted heavy iron shackles, then deliberately covered them with layers of paint. It took real effort to hide them this completely. Evelyn leaned closer, her expression darkening. "So, originally Clara was depicted in chains beside Margaret. Then someone painted over them to make them appear equal." "Exactly," Amanda said. "But why?" She opened her folder. The Whitfields were wealthy Charleston plantation owners before the Civil War. They enslaved over 200 people. Margaret Whitfield was born in 1860, making her 19 in 1879. Clara's name does not appear in official family records, but I found an entry in their plantation logs from 1860. A girl child named Clara, born March 1860 to an enslaved woman named Ruth, assigned to house duties. Amanda felt her chest tighten. So Clara and Margaret were born the same year on the same plantation? "Yes," Evelyn said. Enslaved children were often assigned as companions to white children. They played together when young, though the relationship became unequal as they grew older. By 1879, Clara would have been legally free, but Reconstruction was collapsing. Jim Crow laws were emerging. Many black women had little choice but to continue working for the families that once enslaved them. Amanda studied the painting again. Two women raised together, one the daughter of enslavers, the other enslaved property. By 1879, slavery was over. Yet the shackles remained beneath the paint. "We need to know what happened in 1879, Evelyn said. "Why was this portrait commissioned?" Over the following week, they searched for answers. Margaret married in 1881 and died in 1943. Clara's life proved harder to trace, with only occasional city directory entries listing her as a domestic worker. There was no marriage record and no clear trail after 1885. Then Amanda discovered a letter tucked behind the frame. Dated June 1879, it read, "Dearest Clara, I know this is forbidden. My parents would be furious, but I cannot bear that we will soon be separated forever. You are my oldest friend. Though the world insists we are unequal, my heart knows otherwise. Let this painting preserve our friendship." They sat quietly. They commissioned it in secret, Amanda said, to preserve their bond, but the shackles, Evelyn whispered. Why show Clara in chains? That question guided their next steps. Amanda examined every inch of the canvas and discovered tiny letters etched into the painted tree bark, TWWW, 1879. Evelyn searched Charleston records and found Thomas Wright, a portrait painter with a studio on King Street, active from 1870 to 1884. More importantly, the 1870 census listed Wright as a mixed, race-free person of color serving both black and white clients. This changes everything, Evelyn said. As a black man, Wright understood the complexities. He knew what it meant for Margaret and Clara to sit together like this. Amanda studied the X-rays again, so Wright painted the shackles on purpose. Yes, Evelyn said, he was telling the truth beneath the surface. On the outside, two friends. Underneath, the reality that Clara was still bound, not by chains, but by society. Clara was still bound by economic and legal constraints. They discovered Wright's 1876 advertisement, Tom, as Wright, portrait artist. All clients welcome. The wording signaled that he painted black subjects with the same dignity as white ones. Then Evelyn found an August 1879 newspaper article. Local artist Thomas Wright has departed Charleston for Philadelphia, seeking greater opportunities in the North. Conditions have become untenable for a Negro artist here. He left immediately after completing the portrait, Amanda said. Evelyn nodded. Wright painted something dangerous. Margaret and Clara wanted a memorial of their friendship, but Wright transformed it into something more, a critique. A truth that powerful people would not want exposed. And then he had to leave. Amanda finished the thought. They still needed to understand why the painting had been hidden for decades. Who hid it and why? The answer would prove more heartbreaking than either of them expected. The portrait was not merely a tribute to friendship. It was evidence of a tragedy the Whitfield family had worked hard to erase. Now, 145 years later, that tragedy was finally coming to light. Evelyn knew that fully understanding. The painting required finding Clara's own words, letters, diary entries, anything that captured her perspective. She contacted the Avery Research Center in Charleston, which specialized in African American history. The archivist, Marcus, was intrigued and began searching their collections. 3 weeks later, he called with news. They had found something extraordinary, a collection of letters written by formerly enslaved women, donated in the 1930s by a black church. Among them were several letters written by someone named Clara, dated between 1877 and 1880. Evelyn flew to Charleston immediately. The letters were fragile, written in careful handwriting on cheap paper, the only kind Clara could afford. One letter, dated May 1879, was addressed to Margaret. Dear Margaret, I received your message about the portrait. I do not know if this is wise. Your parents would be furious if they discovered we still meet in secret. But I confess my heart leaps at the thought of sitting beside you once more, as we did as children before the world taught us we were meant to be separate. I will come. I will sit beside you. One final time. Perhaps the painting will prove that what we felt was real, even if no one else understands. Your friend always, Clara. Evelyn's hands trembled as she read it. The letter confirmed that Margaret and Clara had arranged the portrait in secret, against Margaret's parents' wishes. Another letter, dated July 1879, and written after the portrait was completed, revealed something darker. Dear Margaret, I cannot see you anymore. Your father discovered our portrait. He came to where I work, threatened me, and said terrible things. He says if I ever approach you again, he will ensure I am arrested, sent to prison or worse. I know you tried to protect me, but we were foolish to believe we could preserve our friendship. The world will not allow it. Please, do not try to find me. It will only bring more trouble. I must disappear for both our sakes. Remember me kindly, Clara. Evelyn felt sick. Richard Whitfield had discovered the portrait and threatened Clara to force her away from his daughter. She found one final letter, undated and written in shakier handwriting. To whoever finds this, my name is Clara. I was born enslaved on the Whitfield plantation in 1860. Margaret Whitfield was my friend from childhood. We grew up together, played together, and shared secrets. When slavery ended, I hoped things would be different. But freedom is not freedom when you are still bound by poverty, by laws that deny you rights, and by people who see you as property even without chains. Margaret tried to be my friend. She tried to preserve our bond through a portrait. But her father destroyed that dream. I left Charleston because I had no choice. I write this so someone will know that I existed, that my friendship with Margaret was real, and that I was more than what they tried to make me. Clara. These letters changed everything. This was not only about a hidden portrait. It was about two young women whose childhood friendship had been destroyed by racism and by a father who could not accept his daughter caring for a formerly enslaved woman. Evelyn shared the letters with Amanda, who sat in silence after reading them. The shackles in the painting, Amanda said quietly. Wright painted them because Clara was still shackled by poverty. By J. I. M. Crow laws, by men like Richard Whitfield who used threats and intimidation to preserve racial hierarchy, and Margaret knew it. Evelyn added, that is why she hid the painting after her father discovered it. She couldn't display it publicly, but she couldn't destroy it either. It was all she had left of Clara. To understand what happened after Richard Whitfield discovered the portrait, Evelyn searched for his personal papers. The South Carolina Historical Society held the Whitfield family collection, including Richard's correspondence from the 1870s. She found a letter Richard wrote to his wife, Catherine, in July 1879. I have discovered something profoundly disturbing. Margaret commissioned a portrait without our knowledge or permission, showing herself seated beside that Negro girl Clara who once worked here. They are posed as equals, as friends. The artist, some mulatto from King Street, has created an abomination, suggesting our daughter views herself as equal to former slaves. I have dealt with the situation. I located Clara and made clear that any further contact with Margaret will result in severe consequences. I have also ensured the artist has left Charleston. The portrait will be destroyed. But the portrait had not been destroyed. Evelyn found the explanation in Catherine Whitfield's diary, dated August 1879. Richard demands that I destroy Margaret's portrait. He says it is disgraceful, showing improper affection between our daughter and a Negro, but I can not do it. I watched Margaret and Clara grow up together before the war, before everything changed. They were like sisters. She wrote that the world said it was wrong, that Margaret should never have cared for a slave child as she had. But they were children, innocent of the divisions adults created. Margaret had been heartbroken since Richard drove Clara away. The portrait was all she had left. Catherine could not destroy it. Instead, she hid it in the attic, hoping that someday, when those bitter times had passed, it might be understood for what it truly was, a testament to a friendship society would not allow. Catherine had saved the painting. Despite her husband's orders and the pressure of society, she preserved this evidence of her daughter's love for Clara. Evelyn shared this discovery with Amanda. Catherine Whitfield had been complicit in slavery and had benefited from it her entire life. Yet even she could not bring herself to destroy the painting. What happened to Margaret after Clara left? Amanda asked. Evelyn had uncovered that as well. Margaret married in 1881 to a man chosen by her father. She had 3 children and lived a conventional life. But Evelyn found something revealing in Margaret's granddaughter's memoir, published in 1965. The granddaughter wrote that her grandmother, Margaret, was a melancholy woman, often distant. She kept a locked drawer in her desk that no one was allowed to open. After her death, the family discovered it contained letters Fr. Someone named Clara and a small portrait of the 2 women together. Margaret's daughter ordered both burned, calling them improper. The granddaughter regretted the loss, believing they had been important to her grandmother, so Margaret kept Clara's letters her entire life, Amanda said softly. Locked away, hidden, but cherished. And the small portrait mentioned was likely a copy or photograph of the larger painting. That version was destroyed while the original remained hidden in the attic. The story grew clearer and more tragic. 2 friends torn apart by race, one threatened into disappearance, the other forced into a conventional life, while privately mourning the loss. But what happened to Clara after she left Charleston remained unanswered. Tracing Clara's movements after 1879 was difficult. She vanished from Charleston records, likely intentionally. Richard Whitfield's threats had forced her to leave the city entirely. Evelyn contacted genealogists who specialized in African-American family histories across the South. If Clara relocated, there might be traces in employment records, church registrations, or census entries. After weeks of searching, they found a lead. An 1880 census record from Augusta, Georgia, listed a Clara, a black woman, aged 20, unmarried and working. It was not definitive proof Clara was a common name, but the age matched perfectly. Augusta was also close enough to Charleston to be a realistic refuge. Evelyn traveled to Augusta to search city, directories and church archives, At Springfield Baptist Church, she found confirmation. Clara was listed as a member since 1879 and identified as a former resident of Charleston, South Carolina. Church records included a brief interview conducted in 1880 for membership. When asked why she had come to Augusta, Clara replied that she had left Charleston to escape a situation that had become dangerous and hoped to build a new life. Evelyn found more. Clara worked as a laundress in Augusta for 6 years and lived in a boarding house for unmarried black women. She attended church regularly and participated in mutual aid societies that supported formerly enslaved people. In 1885, Clara appeared in marriage records. She married Samuel, a carpenter, both residents of Augusta. For the first time, Evelyn felt hope. Clara had found someone and built a life beyond the loss of Margaret. Census records traced their family forward. In 1890, Clara and Samuel lived in Augusta with 2 children. By 1900, they had 4. Samuel worked steadily as a carpenter while Clara took in laundry to supplement the income. Then, Evelyn found Clara's obituary published in the Augusta Chronicle in 1903. Clara, age 43, had died of pneumonia. She was survived by her husband Samuel and 4 children and was remembered for her quiet dignity and kindness. Services were held at Springfield Baptist Church. The notice was brief and mentioned nothing of her childhood, nothing of Charleston, and nothing of Margaret. On more document remained. Evelyn discovered a letter Samuel had written to Springfield Baptist Church in 1904, donating his wife's few personal belongings to the church's historical collection. He wrote that Clara rarely spoke of her childhood in Charleston, saying the memories were too painful. Before her death, however, she told him about a friend from her youth, a white girl named Margaret, who had been kind to her when kindness was rare. Clara said they had their portrait painted together to preserve their friendship before the world tore them apart. She never saw Margaret again, but thought of her often and carried that loss throughout her life. Samuel donated the letters Clara had kept, hoping they might matter to someone someday. Those were the letters Evelyn had found at the Avery Research Center. Clara had kept them until her death, and Samuel had preserved them afterward. Clara had built her life, married, raised children, and found some measure of peace, but she had carried the loss of Margaret forever. A childhood friendship destroyed by racism. A bond society refused to allow. Evelyn returned to Washington with the full story. Now they had both sides. Margaret forced into a conventional life, secretly keeping Clara's letters locked away. Clara building a new life in Augusta, never forgetting the friend she lost. And between them, hidden in an attic for decades, a portrait capturing one brief moment when they sat together as equals, trying to preserve something the world would not let them keep. With this new understanding, Amanda continued analyzing the painting using infrared scanning. She uncovered even more beneath the surface. The shackles around Clara's wrists were not merely symbolic. They were rendered with extraordinary detail, suggesting that Wright had seen real shackles up close and understood their weight and construction. But Amanda discovered something else. Faint lettering lay beneath the paint layers, hidden in the shadows of the garden scene. She enhanced the image, adjusting the contrast until the words became visible. Though the chains are hidden, they remain. 1879. Wright had written the message beneath the surface, knowing it would never be seen, yet would remain permanently part of the painting's truth. Amanda also found that Wright had originally painted tears on Clara's face, tiny drops at the corners of her eyes before painting over them too to give her a smiling expression. The X-rays revealed those hidden tears clearly. He painted the truth first, Amanda explained to Evelyn. Clara was shown seated beside Margaret, shackled and crying. Then Wright painted over it to create the version they could keep, 2 friends smiling together while the truth remained underneath, permanent and undeniable. It is brilliant and heartbreaking, Evelyn said. Wright gave them the painting they wanted while preserving the reality beneath it. They researched Thomas Wright further and learned that he had settled in Philadelphia, where he continued painting until his death in 1891. His obituary noted that he was known for portraits capturing the dignity of black subjects and the complex realities of freedom after slavery. Wright had painted dozens of similar works, portraits of formerly enslaved people, in which X-ray analysis might reveal hidden truths beneath the surface. His paintings functioned as acts of documentation and resistance, appeared acceptable on the surface while preserving harsh realities underneath. Amanda, and Evelyn decided to present their findings at a joint conference of art historians and scholars of African American history. The revelation of the hidden shackles would challenge prevailing interpretations of post-Civil War portraiture. But first they needed to do something else: find Clara's descendants. Clara had 4 children in Augusta, and those children might have families of their own. Her great-great-grandchildren could be living unaware of this story. Evelyn contacted genealogists in Augusta, providing Clara's married name and her children's names from census records. The search would take time, but if they could find Clara's family and share the story, the discovery would feel complete. Meanwhile, Amanda prepared the painting for exhibition. The Smithsonian planned to display it alongside the X-ray images, allowing the public to see how the shackles had been hidden beneath layers of paint, documenting the truth while appearing to create a conventional portrait. 3 months later, Evelyn received a call from a genealogist in Augusta. They had found Clara's great-great-granddaughter. Her name was Michelle. She lived in Atlanta and taught high school history. When told about the research, she asked to meet. Evelyn and Amanda flew to Atlanta the following week, bringing photographs of the painting and all the documents they had uncovered. Michelle was in her 40s with the same gentle eyes seen in Clara's portrait. When shown the painting, she stared silently for a long time. "That is my great-great-grandmother," she whispered. She had heard stories that Clara had been enslaved as a child in Charleston, that she left suddenly, and rarely spoke of her past. But her family had never known why. They showed Michelle the letters, the documents, and the X-rays revealing the hidden shackles. She cried as she read Clara's words, learning about the friendship with Margaret, and finally understanding the sadness her ancestor had carried. She lost her friend, Michelle said, a childhood friend taken away because of racism. She carried that loss for 43 years. "Yes," Evelyn said, "but she also survived. She built a life and had a family. You exist because Clara was strong enough to start over in Augusta." Michelle nodded slowly. Then she asked about Margaret's family. Amanda explained that the Whitfields still lived in Charleston and had not yet been contacted. "I want to meet them," Michelle said firmly. "I want them to know Clara never forgot our ancestor, that the friendship was real, that it mattered." Evelyn contacted the Whitfield family and explained what had been discovered about the portrait. After some hesitation, Margaret's great-great-grandson David agreed to meet. They arranged the meeting at the Smithsonian, where the painting was being prepared for exhibition. David Whitfield arrived looking uneasy, a tall man in his 50s, with blonde hair reminiscent of Margaret's in the portrait. Michelle was already there, standing before the painting, studying the image of her ancestor. David approached slowly, seeing the painting clearly for the first time. He explained that his family had donated it years earlier, knowing only that it had been hidden in their grandmother's attic. "Your family tried to erase this story," Michelle said, her voice steady but firm. "Your ancestor threatened mine, forced her to leave Charleston, and destroyed her friendship with his daughter." David lowered his gaze. "Evelyn shared the documents. I am ashamed of what my ancestor did," David said. "But Margaret, my great-great-grandmother, tried to preserve this. She kept Clara's letters locked away her entire life." "She kept letters while living in comfort," Michelle replied. "My ancestor lost everything: her friend, her home, her childhood. She had to start over in a strange city with nothing." The tension was heavy. Evelyn intervened gently. "Both women," she said, "were victims of a system that would not allow their friendship. Margaret could not openly defy her father without losing everything. Clara had no power to resist his threats. The true villain was the racism that made their friendship impossible." They stood together in silence, looking at the painting where their ancestors sat side by side, smiling, captured in a moment of equality the world had denied them in life. Finally, David spoke. He said he wanted to help make things right. His family had resources. They could create a scholarship in Clara's name, support the exhibition, and ensure her story was told alongside Margaret's. Michelle considered this. Clara did not want charity, she said. She wanted dignity, equality, and the freedom to be friends without threats or violence. David said he understood. He could not change the past, but he could try to honor the women's memory now and help tell their story. After a long moment, Michelle nodded. Clara's story would be told fully, she said. Not softened or made comfortable. The truth about the shackles, the threats, and the loss has to be included. David agreed. Over the following months, they worked together to plan the exhibition. Michelle provided family photos of Clara's descendants and documents from her life in Augusta. David contributed Whitfield family records, including Catherine's diary and Margaret's life story. The exhibition would display the painting alongside X-rays revealing the hidden shackle. Letters from both women and details of their lives after their forced separation. Contemporary photographs were included, as well as Michelle teaching African American history to her students, and David at his architecture firm in Charleston designing affordable housing. Both were living full lives made possible by ancestors who had survived impossible circumstances. The exhibition was titled Hidden Chains, symbolizing a friendship that survived on canvas, though it could not survive in life. Before the opening, Michelle and David stood together in front of the painting one last time. "They look happy here," Michelle said softly in this moment, captured by an artist who understood their truth. "They got to be just two friends sitting together." David agreed. Right gave them that gift, even while painting the reality of the shackles underneath. "I hope they knew," Michelle whispered. "I hope Margaret and Clara somehow knew that 145 years later their descendants would stand here together telling their story, owning what they tried to preserve." They stood silently, connected by a friendship their ancestors had shared briefly before the world tore it apart. Now they were working together to ensure that friendship was finally remembered and honored. The exhibition opened at the Smithsonian in March 2025. The gallery was packed with historians, art conservators, descendants of enslaved people, journalists, and visitors drawn by the story of the hidden shackles. The painting hung at the center of the main wall, spotlighted. On one side were large X-ray images showing the shackles around Clara's wrists and ankle, the hidden tears on her face, and Wright's secret message beneath the paint. On the other side, the finished portrait showed two young women sitting peacefully, smiling. Exhibition text explained, in 1879, two young women who grew up together on a South Carolina plantation, one as the master's daughter, one as enslaved property, secretly commissioned this portrait to preserve their childhood friendship. Margaret Whitfield and Clara were both 19 years after slavery's end. They hoped this painting would prove their bond was real, even as society insisted they remain separate and unequal. Thomas Wright, a free man of color, painted a profound truth. He first depicted Clara in shackles, tears on her face, showing the reality that freedom had not ended her bondage to poverty, racism, and social constraints. He then painted over these elements, creating the peaceful scene the women could keep. Beneath the paint, the truth remained permanent and undeniable, waiting 145 years to be revealed. Visitors moved quietly through the exhibition, reading letters from both women, learning of Richard Whitfield's threats, and discovering how the painting had been hidden for decades. One section traced Clara's life after Charleston, her marriage, her children, and Samuel's letter preserving her memory. Another highlighted Margaret's life, her conventional marriage, the locked drawer containing Clara's letters, and her granddaughter's account of burning them after Margaret's death. Wright's story was also featured, including his other portraits, his flight to Philadelphia, and his death in 1891. Several other Wright paintings were displayed alongside with infrared analysis, suggesting they might conceal hidden truths beneath their surfaces. The most powerful moment came in the final room, where large photographs showed Michelle and David standing together before the portrait. Their own stories were displayed alongside their ancestors. Michelle had written a statement. "My great-great-grandmother Clara survived slavery, survived being torn from her childhood friend, survived threats, poverty, and racism. She built a life in Augusta, raised 4 children, and passed down to her descendants a legacy of resilience. I teach history because Clara believed in education, because she understood that telling the truth about the past helps us build a better future." This painting almost remained hidden forever, just like so many black women's stories are hidden, erased, or forgotten. Clara's story survived in letters, in a painting beneath a painting, in memories passed through generations. And now her story will be known. David had written, "My great-great-grandmother Margaret tried to preserve a friendship the world wouldn't allow. She failed. Racism and her father's cruelty destroyed what she and Clara had built, but she never stopped caring. She kept Clara's letters locked away for 60 years, unable to share them but unable to destroy them. Margaret was complicit in a system of oppression by her position and privilege. Even as she personally cared for someone that system oppressed, her story is complicated and uncomfortable, but it is important to tell, to show how racism harmed everyone, even those who benefited materially. I cannot undo what my ancestor Richard did, but I can honor what Margaret tried to preserve and what Clara survived." The exhibition became one of the Smithsonian's most visited. News coverage was extensive. Scholars began analyzing other Thomas Wright paintings, uncovering more hidden truths. The story of Margaret and Clara sparked conversations about childhood friendships across racial lines, the enduring harm of slavery's legacy, and the complicated relationships between white and black women in the post-war South. 6 months after the exhibition opened, Michelle received a package at her Atlanta home. Inside the package was a letter from an elderly woman in Charleston named Patricia. Dear Michelle, it read, I am 92 years old, and I am Clara's youngest daughter. Yes, I am your great-great-grandmother. I am still alive. I saw the exhibition news and wanted you to know that I remember my mother. She died when I was 3, but I have one memory. She showed me a small drawing she had kept hidden, a sketch of herself and another young woman sitting together. She told me, this is my friend Margaret. The world said we couldn't be friends, but we were. Remember that. The world is often wrong about who deserves love. I have kept that drawing for 89 years. I am sending it to you now. It should be with the portrait. Michelle opened the package with shaking hands. Inside, carefully wrapped, was a small pencil sketch on aged paper. It showed 2 young girls, perhaps 7 or 8 years old, holding hands and smiling. At the bottom, in a child's handwriting, it read Margaret and Clara, 1867. They had drawn this themselves as children, 12 years before the formal portrait, when their friendship was still innocent, and the full weight of racial hierarchy hadn't yet crushed them. Michelle immediately contacted Amanda and Evelyn. The sketch was added to the exhibition, displayed in a case with Patricia's letter, showing that even 3-year-old Patricia had absorbed her mother's message about friendship across racial lines. Michelle visited Patricia in Charleston. The elderly woman cried as she saw photographs of her mother's descendants for generations she had never met. All thriving, all educated, all carrying forward Clara's legacy. Mama would be so proud, Patricia whispered. She always said education was everything, that we had to learn and grow, and never let anyone make us feel small. She learned that from her childhood, Michelle explained. Margaret taught her to read when they were children, before it was discovered and punished. That is why your mother valued education so deeply. Patricia nodded. Mama never forgot Margaret. Even at the end, she spoke about her friend from childhood. She said, some friendships are so true that not even the world's cruelty can completely destroy them. The exhibition was extended for another year due to popular demand. Schools brought students to see it, using Margaret and Clara's story to teach about slavery's legacy, the persistence of racism, and the human capacity for connection across artificial divides. Michelle and David became friends themselves, a bond forged through their shared work honoring their ancestors. They spoke together at conferences, wrote articles together, and advocated for teaching difficult histories honestly. 5 years after the exhibition opened, Michelle published a book, Hidden Chains, My Great-Grandmother's Story and the Friendship That Survived in Paint. The book combined Clara's letters, the painting's history, and Michelle's reflections on discovering this story. In the final chapter, she wrote, I teach my students that history isn't just dates and events. It's people, relationships, love, loss, and survival. Margaret and Clara loved each other as children before the world taught them they shouldn't. They tried to preserve that love through a portrait, but racism was stronger. Clara lost her friend, her home, everything familiar. But she didn't let that loss destroy her. She built a new life, raised children, and passed down stories and values that reach me 5 generations later. The shackles Thomas Wright painted weren't just historical. They represented chains that still exist in different forms. But Clara's resilience, her refusal to be defined only by what was done to her, survives. It survives in me, in my students, in everyone who learns her story and refuses to let histories like hers be forgotten. The portrait remained at the Smithsonian, with X-rays permanently displayed beside it. Visitors from around the world came to see the friendship captured on the surface, the shackles hidden beneath, and the truth Thomas Wright had preserved across 145 years. In Atlanta, Michelle kept Patricia's childhood sketch in her school office, showing it to students and telling them about 2 little girls who held hands and drew pictures together, unaware the world would try to tear them apart. But look, she would tell them, pointing at the sketch, and then at photographs of the formal portrait. They fought to stay connected. Margaret commissioned that painting. Clara kept the letters. Thomas Wright painted the truth underneath. And now, all these years later, we know their story. We know they mattered. We know their friendship was real. The chains were hidden. But so was the resistance. So was the love. So was the truth. And truth has a way of surviving. Even when buried beneath layers of paint. Even when hidden in attics. Even when powerful people try to erase it. Truth survives. And so do we.